Thank you very much, members of the public, members of the media, for joining us here today. This morning we had an initial North-South Activist Summit meeting. Activists and government officials and former government officials from 4 different states and 2 different countries came together to meet. What we discussed and what we realized was that we are facing common problems, that those common problems have common sources and common solutions. We've recognized that the violence that's plaguing the streets of Mexico, that's claiming the lives of 40 people per day, and has claimed the lives of over 86,000 people since 2006, is driven by the same kind of violence that we saw on the streets of Oakland on the same day that Oaksterdam University was raided when there was a mass shooting at Oikos University. We see the same kind of diversion of law enforcement resources to deal with things that are not truly crimes while serious crimes are going on. And we know that the solution to all of these is cannabis reform. We're grateful to President Fox for coming here today, for traveling this distance to meet with us. We're grateful to him for his support. As you'll hear, he is supportive of many of the legislative and initiative efforts that we are undertaking as activists here in California and in other states. Especially grateful to him because this is just part of an ongoing commitment on the President's part to engage with us as a movement, to begin building bridges, to begin identifying common strategies, and moving towards common solutions to the problems that are plaguing communities on both sides of the border. The President was invited here by Jamen Shively, who's also going to be one of our speakers today. I met Jamen when he joined the ArcView group, which is an investors group that I organized for the industry. And I got to know him over the course of the past few months. And what I learned about Jamen was that there's 2 themes in his life. One is a theme of service, which he'll tell you about, that started at the age of 16 when he went to Mexico to build latrines for folks who didn't have them. He built those latrines so well and so efficiently that he ended up being in charge of the latrine building program. Those twin themes of service and competency have marked his career and his life since then, and he will tell you about that in a little bit more detail. Jamen?
Thank you very much, Steve. Are we on? Great. So first of all, before I introduce our distinguished guests, I would like to just add a bit to what Steve said about why we're all here today. Ending the prohibition of cannabis is one of the top global transformational issues of our time, affecting war, hunger, poverty, environmental harm, human rights abuses, and crime. These global issues are all interconnected and self-reinforcing. Transforming one of these issues provides us direct access to transforming all of these issues. We are here today to plan the path forward on the one issue which is by far the easiest for us to transform globally, which is that of the prohibition of cannabis. This is very much an international conversation. There is no better place to hold this historic meeting today than the San Francisco Bay Area, birthplace to some of the most progressive revolutions which have swept through this country, including the gay rights movement. I'm proud to be a son of the Bay Area, home of my father, John Shively, of my grandmother, Josefina Pellicer, daughter of Diego Pellicer. Looking ahead, with the prohibition of cannabis replaced with responsible systems of regulation and control, at a global level, we, as an international coalition, will have made direct positive impacts on the other global issues, including crime. By the responsible regulation and control of cannabis, we will immediately reduce instances of crime, arrests, and incarcerations here in the United States. Yet it is Mexico where the impact of prohibition has the most devastating impact on human life. Over 86,000 people have died in drug cartel violence since 2006, which vastly exceeds the number of Americans killed during the entire Vietnam War. Once we replace the failed policy of prohibition in the United States, these senseless killings in Mexico will come to an end. And reducing crime will have a direct impact on reducing poverty. No longer will the United States arrest over 800,000 people every year, predominantly poor minorities, for the victimless crime of possessing cannabis. Furthermore, we will be creating jobs. Post-prohibition, industrial hemp will provide the world with abundant pulp and paper, textiles, building materials, and nutritious foods, as it did during the golden age of hemp, which was the era of my great-grandfather, Diego Pellicer, who was the largest grower of hemp in the world in the late 1800s. My experience in Mexico goes back, as Steve mentioned, to when I was 16 years old and began building latrines and participating in health education programs in the state of Guanajuato, Mexico, where President Fox is third generation and where he served as governor prior to becoming president. I first met President Fox personally when he came to inaugurate Shively International's 25th Educational Computer Center, which we built and operated inside public schools in the state of Sinaloa, Mexico, a pioneering project for bridging the digital divide, one of President Fox's top priorities as president. It is my honor to introduce to you a man who has dedicated his life to leading his country and the world in transforming our planet through his leadership and through his shining example into a more peaceful, loving, and prosperous world. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the first democratically elected president of Mexico, President Vicente Fox. Señor Presidente.
Thank you, partner. Thank you, Steve. And thank you all for giving us this morning where we came to very interesting ways of partnering on this challenge that we have together. This state is a vanguard state. This city, this Bay Area, is leading the road to a safer community, to eradicating violence, crime, separating the issue from health in the case of cannabis, and the proposal, very positive, that it represents. I am here to address all of you because of the horrific violence that is spread out through Mexico on the so-called war on drugs. Every day we're losing 40 young people. Every day we're paying the toll of blood and violence. And we in Mexico must get out of this trap. And we have seen here how, with using talent, wisdom, and intelligence, we can detonate a process to move out of violence. And I am absolutely convinced that by partnering, by working together, we will speed these virtuous processes and make sure that we bring peace back to Mexico, to the families in Mexico. This state has decided in this Bay Area together to lead a new path, to change the paradigm by legalizing and ending the prohibition stage on the case of cannabis for its medical use and also for adult responsible use. In Mexico, we welcome this initiative because the cost of the war is becoming unbearable, too high for Mexico and for Latin America and for the rest of the world. The impact on the economy, on income, on tourism, on investment, the loss of talent, and above all, the loss of hope in those 80,000 kids dead called for action. All this happens because of the mammoth consumption levels on this nation that generate amounts of money that are used back in Mexico to bribe government officials, to arm the cartels, to hire these kids that have not alternative opportunities. This has to be changed. To this case, what we witnessed here is a game changer. It's a change of paradigm. It's the starting of a new path that will take us to peace and harmony by moving out of the prohibition paradigm and getting into the regulation, the education, the information, the prevention on the responsible use of cannabis, both for medical use and for adult use. Of course, I have many questions about the implementation. Of course, we all have questions. What is going to be the next scenario? But we can work together. We can work together with high ends and high objectives and motivations. This is an issue of a strategic interest and concern around the world. This historic step is to be observed by millions, by citizens all over the world, and specifically in Mexico. This is why we have invited to come to Centro Fox in the community of San Cristobal in the state of Guanajuato in Mexico for a symposium where an important U.S. delegation has been invited to come and a delegation from Mexican relevant leaders that take decisions on this respect. Very high quality participants will be integrating this symposium and this dialogue. Personalities like Dr. Julio Frank, who is head of the School of Health in Harvard University, former health minister in my administration, very important and relevant personalities from government health ministry, from media, from other sources to participate on the dialogue and the debate. We must create awareness in Mexico. We must start a road to change the paradigm. Mexico cannot afford more blood and the loss of more young people. We must get out of the trap where we are. We know it's not an easy path. And first and above all, this task will be full compliance with the law, like is being done here. Elimination of violence and crime, good responsible use of freedom, intense education, information and prevention practices, and the best possible benefits to the community within a solid foundation of morality, ethics, and values. We have witnessed the case here in the Bay Area. We have been able to see how central government, federal government, keeps pressing a sovereign decision that has been taken by citizens of these states and other states, like the state of Washington or the state of Colorado. This situation must change, and we must provoke that change by working together. This is why we have decided to partner and work together. This is why this delegation will be coming to Mexico. We know that we provoke synergy and we nourish the possibility and the speeding up of the process by taking actions and positions in Mexico, as well as taking actions and positions here in the state of California. So from San Francisco, now we're moving to San Cristobal in the state of Guanajuato. Finally, I reiterate the same message. Mexico must get out of this trap, and we can do it, like the way it's being done here in the Bay Area, the way it's being done in the state of Washington and the state of Colorado, as well as the so many other states that have taken the step on the case of medical use of cannabis. We're sure that with actions together, we will reach our objectives. I have a full commitment with this group. I have a full commitment with Mexico and with Mexican families. And we, Marta and myself, have a full commitment with peace and harmony that has to be brought back to Mexico. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, President Fox. We are lucky to have with us a current elected official, Roger Goodman, who is a state legislator in Washington State. Roger?
Thank you, Stephen. Good afternoon. Once again, I'm Roger Goodman, chair of the House Public Safety Committee in the Washington State Legislature, also senior member of the Judiciary Committee in the state legislature in Washington. Washington State, as you know, is one of the first 2 jurisdictions on the planet to institute a fully regulated legal market for cannabis for general adult use. And we have made the right move. And so far, the regulations that just 5 days ago were published in draft form to institute this regulated market, the whole process has been going extremely well. As the chair of the House Public Safety Committee, I am most concerned about public safety. Indeed, there might be businesses that pop up and pay tax revenue to the state, which we'll be able to use for health care and for education. We all have our budget crisis. But my concern is for public spaces to be safe, for families and children to be safer. And I have come down here to California, down on the West Coast, to join in the support for President Fox in his effort to reduce the carnage in his home country. Because the model that we have put into place in Washington State is a model that should, and I believe will be replicated across the country and across the world. And I'm aware that there are legislators in Mexico who are taking the Washington State model and replicating it to have legislation introduced in Mexico very soon. So I just wanted to state that I'm willing to come all the way down here to California to express my support for President Fox and his effort. This is an international effort, and we in Washington seek to sort of set the standard. And as I said, we're doing very well now in coming up with the regulations. The governor of the state and the attorney general of the state of Washington, with whom I have almost daily contact, as well as our Liquor Control Board, which will be renamed the Liquor and Cannabis Board, the regulatory agency in charge of our new regulatory system, are fully in support and are investing our political capital in ensuring that this new regulatory system will be successful and in our negotiations with the federal government as well. Prohibition has failed, and a rational, strict regulatory system that we are now imposing in Washington State is the way to go. We want to make sure we do it right, and I believe we are doing it right, and so I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Roger. We are now going to hear from some of the local California activists who participated in the meeting, as well as some participants from other states. Before we move on to that, I just want to recognize my brilliant attorney, Henry Wykowski, who is present for the meetings. Henry has no comment at this point, but I did want to recognize him. I think we'd like to hear now from Dale Sky Jones. Dale has been of service to our community and our movement in many different ways over the past several years. She's one of our most brilliant leaders. Every time I sit down to speak with her, I hear a new great idea about how to make change. Dale?
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you for pulling this together. As I sit here, I'm just extremely excited to see the bravery and leadership from elected officials. It's very difficult for current elected officials to step out, and it is in fact necessary that former elected officials step out. And so we appreciate your bravery in taking the lead in this, because it's truly what's going to get us a change in this policy. We do have an opportunity for safer communities if we simply choose to control, tax, and regulate cannabis for adult consumption and for medical use. This really is two separate issues. One is medical, and the other is civil justice. And we are on the cusp of the next civil justice revolution. Frankly, nowhere has the American drug war affected more people than Mexico. So it's even more important that the people that we trust to lead us, that we elect to represent us, step out and take the lead in this. As Chancellor for Oaksterdam University, education is what I believe is the key to move this issue forward, to educate those that we love, and most importantly, to educate our children. This little one is a constant reminder to all of us of why we're really here, isn't it? It's about the children. It's about saving our children. And it's about our kids growing up in a society that values not just who they are and what they do, but what they're capable of. And as we approach the 50-year anniversary of our own American hero, Dr. King, I also have a dream that we're going to let this little one grow up in a world where we value not just him, but also little ones just like him that come from Black or brown communities and are automatically targeted simply because of the communities that they come from. It's important that white women stand up and start talking about this. It's important that you start discussing this with your grandparents, with your sons, with your daughters, with your sisters, probably not with your bosses quite yet. That was a joke. I know this is a very serious issue, but this is part of where we have to get to, is allowing the influence to happen. There are two things that people need to know, to believe in, to make this change. They need to know that it's worth it. It's up to us to illustrate the great change we can make. And they need to know that they can do it. And it's the people on this panel, I think, that will give faith to the individuals in their own community that we can make that happen. So I'm proud, as the chairwoman of the Coalition for Cannabis Policy Reform, which is the largest organization here in California, representing everyone from Latino organizations, NAACP, labor unions, cops, moms, folks just like yourself, to try to make this change. I do appreciate your time and consideration in this matter, and I hope that you yourselves choose to get involved and visit these websites. I know that you have a couple as well, cannabispolicyreform.org, or just learn more at Oaksterdam University. But the key here is to educate yourself. This isn't about legalizing marijuana. This is about building more schools than prisons. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dale. And let's hear now from the other Dale of our California cannabis movement, Dr. Derringer, who has also served us mostly very consistently in the role of Director of California NORML an organization that's been active here on the ground arguably longer than any other organization. Dale.
Thank you, and thank you, President Fox, for expressing your support on this important issue. This really is an international issue. The traffic is international, the crime and violence are international, and the laws are international as well. Marijuana, the word, came to us first from Mexico. The war on marijuana really took root here in the United States, and it was 100 years ago that we had the very first marijuana arrest of Mexicans in California, in Los Angeles, in 1914. Since then, the war expanded. We had a national law in 1937, and finally, prohibition was ensconced in an international treaty in 1961, really at the instigation of the United States. And this international treaty is with us yet and remains an important stumbling block to real reform in the United States, because this treaty commits the United States and Mexico and every country in the world to keeping cannabis illegal. Keeping the use illegal, keeping the trade illegal. Even with respect to medical cannabis, this treaty, while it does theoretically allow for that, it does not allow the kind of system that we have operating here in California or in many other states, because it requires a national monopoly by the U.S. government in all of the medical marijuana. So even that's not happening. So we need changes in international law and in the international treaty to go forward. So this problem, we will do what we can here in California, but we need support from all over the world on this. And we are really glad that President Fox is here to put Mexico's hat in the ring. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Dale. We're also honored to have with us today one of the leading longtime activists from the state of Washington who played a critical role in the passage of 502. I first got to know John Davis as an organizer for the largest event in our movement, the Seattle Hemp Fest. He's worked tirelessly over many, many years on behalf of this movement, on behalf of our community. He's now a pioneer in the legal adult use cannabis industry in the state of Washington. John?
Thank you so much, Steve. I'll keep my remarks brief, but I'd like to say how honored I am to be here amongst the president and so many activists, not just up here, but in this room, that have worked so tirelessly and so hard through the barren years where there was no press. Let alone press conferences. And allow me to say that I am so looking forward to going to Mexico and having these international perspectives brought together. I am fascinated to talk to representatives from Portugal, in particular Holland, to see what their lessons learned are. Fate has brought me to a point in Washington State where I work every day on implementation of a regime of legalization. And I work very closely with the Liquor Control Board. And I am so looking forward to hearing what those voices say at the conference and having the opportunity to bring those voices to listen and to bring those voices and those lessons learned back to Washington, because I understand that we have to have success in this program of 502, that if we don't do it correctly, that we run the risk of having the world be able to point to us and say, legalization didn't work. Taxation and regulation needs to be seen as a success, and I thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much, John. We are going to close with some comments by my friend Nate Bradley. Nate also has a lifetime of service. He is a veteran. He also served as a narcotics enforcement officer for a number of years, recognized the lack of integrity in pursuing that profession, changed his ways, and is now one of the leading law enforcement advocates for changing the cannabis laws. Nate.
Hi, everybody. My name's Nate Bradley. I'm a speaker for law enforcement against prohibition, and I'm also the founder of a group called Lawmen Protecting Patients. I worked in law enforcement from 2003 to 2009, and I went into it with the mindset of I was going to help people. And what I saw was a war on drugs that was doing the exact opposite of that. And I'm so happy that 6 years later, after budget cuts cost me my job, I thought my world was over. I've got a new life the last 3 years. I've been able to speak out for the first time and actually help. I'm so happy we've got people like President Fox here and Mr. Shively. I've got a speech impediment. S and P's are my two, so you guys are killing me with that. And Mr. Shively are here to help, because I go to churches and I can speak to groups, but with names like this, it goes from reaching 20 people at a time to 1,000 to 10,000 to 1,000,000 people at a time. And I'm so grateful now that we've got people like this working with us. I now work at the state capitol. I work on regulation, and I'm looking forward to working with them to getting them known at the state capitol. So hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years, when we start pushing legalization through the state legislature, and then maybe a ballot initiative, they're going to help us lay all that groundwork the next couple years. And I would just like to thank them for working with us on that. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Nate, and all of our presenters. I realized that in making the introductions, I neglected to introduce myself. My name is Steve DeAngelo. I've been an activist in the cause of cannabis law reform for about 40 years, and I am most well known, or perhaps most notorious, as Executive Director of Haborside Health Center. We are now going to open up the floor for questions from members of the media. Yes, this lady had her hand up first, so if we could just take her question first, then we'll be right to you.
Mr. President, how do you think that the cartels will react specifically if marijuana is legalized in the United States? What would they do? Well,
Of course, I cannot have a concrete answer on that, not even to interpret what the reaction is going to be. But certainly, through this movement, we're going to have the possibility, very strong possibility, to reduce their income. And by reducing their income, especially the one they raise here on the U.S. market, they will be debilitated, and certainly they would have to start a reduction of their activities. I'm absolutely convinced that this step forward is not only a change of paradigm, but it's the answer to something that has not worked. Nor did the call for the war on drugs made 40 years ago by President Nixon totally a failure, an absolute failure, nor the call for the war on criminals and drugs in Mexico convoked by President Calderon. Total failure again. the amount of kids being killed every day increases. So we must stop this. The longer we take, the more days that we will have a loss of 40 kids every day are being killed in Mexico. This is why we convoke with urgency to this meeting. That's why we're sitting together. That's why we're running this symposium in the state of Guanajuato.
Friend from Univision. Telemundo, perdón.
Tres partes. Uno, ¿cuál es la justificación para legalizar la marihuana? Dos, ¿le preocupa que lo vean como que el presidente se pasó a vendedor de marihuana? Y tres, ¿usted fuma marihuana?
Okay, the justification as far as we have reached... la justificación hasta donde hemos hecho investigación en el think tank de Centro Fox es clara, es evitar la violencia, es terminar con esta guerra inútil que solo ha provocado sangre y muerte en México. Número dos, es para ilustrar, para llevar información concreta y objetiva a los mexicanos, mis queridos paisanos, aquí en los Estados Unidos y a todos los mexicanos en México. Que se entienda esta solución para evitar que nuestros hijos en cualquier momento puedan ser causa de una muerte violenta o evitar que aquellas mujeres y familias completas que van de los Estados Unidos a visitar a sus familiares no tengan que vivir esa pesadilla. Muchos de ellos han cancelado sus viajes para allá. Yo llamo a las familias, a las mamás, a los papás, a los jóvenes aquí en los Estados Unidos a hacer conciencia de que aquí hay una solución clara, que la prohibición, el dogma religioso no ha funcionado. Este es pues algunos de los motivos. Sobre el caso mío, tengo que decir un no rotundo. Ni he probado, ni he intentado, ni lo voy a hacer. Mis razones son de compromiso total con México, de ayudar a México a salir de esta trampa en la que estamos y de lograr que la paz y la tranquilidad regrese a nuestras calles, a nuestras carreteras, a nuestras ciudades, a nuestros ranchos y rancherías.
¿No le preocupa que vean que quizás se está aprovechando de esto para cultivar, generar dinero y que lo vean como que el presidente que se pasó a cultivar de marihuana?
Esa palabra no cabe en la acción que está haciendo Centro Fox. Somos una fundación sin fines de lucro, sin motivos partidistas, sin motivos religiosos. Y esta acción que se está tomando aquí en los Estados Unidos es una acción de responsabilidad social. Nadie está buscando hacer más negocio. Aquí todos estamos buscando salvar más vidas, todos estamos buscando un mejor ambiente para el crecimiento de nuestros hijos y nuestros jóvenes, y todos estamos justificando y documentando que la cannabis no es ni siquiera tan dañina como el alcohol o como los cigarrillos, y que la propia cannabis sirve para propósitos médicos, que reduce la pena y el dolor, pero además es curativa. Hay muchas informaciones al respecto. Creo pues que lo que necesitamos es que todo mundo conozca con claridad esta información y no escuchar la voz, muchas veces anónima, de la prohibición que ha resultado en un fracaso total.
And secondly, can you tell us, Mr. President, what role do you envision yourself playing in Mexico in regard to the legalization of cannabis?
Okay, I came here first to Seattle in the state of Washington, and now to the Bay here in California, to learn about this experience and to find out that it's exciting, the new paradigm that is being built. I know the stories of Portugal, which after 10 years of legalization, and the end result is 25% decrease in consumption. And this story is going to be told right there in San Cristobal at the summit, at the symposium that we're convoking. Same thing with Holland. Everybody thought that they were going to be destroying families and destroying the nation and its economy, and nothing special happened. So what we have to use is our wisdom, our capacity to think, and our capacity to freely decide with responsibility. We were created free. The founding fathers of this nation did mention that state and governments do not have the right to intervene in our behavior and in our conscience and in our decisions unless we affect third parties. But if that is not happening, we should be let free to decide on our own. I think there are very strong ethical and moral reasons for that. And the state will never have the capacity to implement a prohibition, and it has proven to be a total failure. But the governments, the state can have a much better strategy, and this is what we are promoting in Mexico. Fortunately, pretty soon, in a couple of months, a bill is going to be introduced to Mexican Federal Congress with a initiative inspired on the changes that have been done in the state of Washington and the state of Colorado. And I'm going to be strongly supporting that bill, even though it does not come from members of my own party. So I'm going to support it strongly because I think it's the way out of the trap where we are in Mexico. And as long as we keep working together, synergy will be the end result. And as much as Mexico advances, more so will California. And as much as California advances, will nourish the change in Mexico. We're partners in NAFTA, we share a common border, and we must share destiny and decisions to the future.
President Fox, if marijuana were legalized, there's still illegal drugs in which the narco-traffickers deal that are in high demand in the United States. Do we have an idea of how much of the cartel's business is in marijuana and how much violence would be reduced should marijuana just be legalized?
Step at a time, step at a time. Let's take the example of alcohol. Not because red or white wine has a much lower content of alcohol or vodka has much more, there's a difference in the way they're treated. So I am all along for legalizing all drugs together like Portugal did. Because the reasons behind is ethical and moral reasons. It's this freedom that we all are created with to take our own decisions responsibly, to take care of our body and our health within our own decisions. So to me, it should be all drugs which might be today the last frontier of prohibitions. Prohibitions have been eradicated. On the case of abortion, on the case of marriage among persons of the same sex, on the case of the forbidden and prohibited apple in the Garden of Eden, and by being prohibited is the first apple that Adam and Eve had. So to me, it's much better to explain the reasons. If God created us free, He even let us sin against Him and go against Him, and He respects our freedom. Maybe He would have explained to Adam and Eve that that apple had worms, the strategy would have worked much better than just prohibiting.
Con mucho gusto.
¿Cuál es su justificación? ¿Cuál es su idea? ¿Y es realista?
Bueno, mi idea es participar con el señor presidente en el simposio que estamos convocando en México de las fechas 18 al 20 de julio, empezando apenas en 10 días. Ahora, convocamos esta rueda de prensa por la razón de que es urgente dar a comunicar lo que estamos convocando en México y lo que vamos a convocar después. Hay urgencia. Se están muriendo 40 personas diarias en el país de México, dado esta guerra en contra de las personas, que algunos dicen guerra en contra de las drogas. Es una guerra en contra de las personas. Nosotros pedimos una disculpa por tan poco aviso. Apenas en 10 días comienza el simposio en México. Pero como como decimos el señor presidente y yo, más vale pedir perdón por el poco aviso, el corto aviso para el simposio, que pedir perdón en 40 funerales en México mañana y pasado mañana y el día después. Es por eso que nosotros nos aliamos en convocar este simposio sobre la legalización y el uso médico del cannabis.
¿Y es realista pensar de que hay suficiente apoyo para que haya un cambio significativo?
Absolutamente. Esta cuestión de que si es realista o no, cada revolución que se ha dado en el mundo, primero la gente dijo, es imposible, no se puede. Y la gente rió. Y después la gente dijo las razones por las cuales no se puede hacer. Pero en ocasión, revolución tras revolución, nosotros, los seres humanos, hemos mostrado que sí se puede. Absolutamente es realista.
I am just struck by this bilingual exchange that we're having, and what an illustration of it is of the commonality of the problems that we are facing and the commonality of the solutions that we are pursuing. Could you briefly reprise your remarks in English, though, for those of us in the room who don't speak fluent Spanish?
Thank you, Steve. Absolutely. So the question was put, why are we working here today, and what is the purpose of what we're doing? And so I mentioned that we have organized a symposium jointly. Centro Fox is organizing the symposium, and I, as CEO of Diego Pellicer, am proud to be a sponsor of the symposium for the legalization and medical use of cannabis. This symposium begins the afternoon of July 18th and extends through July 20th in San Cristobal in the state of Guanajuato. And I also expressed that there is urgency. Now, this is just with 10 days of notice that we're announcing this at this press conference, and we apologize for the short notice. And I said, we would much rather apologize to the American people and to the international community for the short notice in inviting everyone, experts, representatives from government, representatives from the movement of cannabis, and other experts to come to this symposium on such short notice than to apologize at another 40 funerals tomorrow in Mexico, and another 40 funerals the day after that, and the day after that. There is urgency here. Steve DeAngelo said, if this level of carnage were existing in the United States, something would be done about it immediately. It is our failed policy of prohibition in the United States which is directly responsible for this massive level of death in Mexico, and we must treat it with the same level of urgency as if these deaths were happening on our own soil.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands from members of the media. Are there any further questions? Chris?
Do we have an indication of how receptive current President Peña Nieto is going to be to the prospect of legalizing cannabis in Mexico?
Well, I guess Mexico in year 2000 reached a electoral status of being a democracy. So it's not now the voice of the president that counts. It's the voice of people, like it happens in every democracy. And I am absolutely convinced that he will be open and positive for the reaction of the citizens and the people, as well as Congress, that will receive this bill in the next 2 months, and we'll have to process it. And I am absolutely convinced that if we work together on both sides of the border, we would move along much faster. So I'll do my job, and Centro Fox is doing his job in Mexico, and with the support of this group participating there, as well as I am here to participate in support of all actions and promotions needed in this state of California to move at a high-speed rate towards the change, the paradigmatic change.
And Senator President, for those of us unfamiliar with Mexican politics, I mean, are people in Mexico now, are they tired of the drug war? How would you gauge public opinion in Mexico right now?
Absolutely tired of the drug war, and that's why the demand for a change is being strong and insistent. And that's why actual government had to change the war policy established by Presidente Calderón. This is why I started expressing myself and campaigning time ago, 3-4 years, against the way power and enforcement was being exercised in Mexico, the constant and frequent violations of human rights most every day, and the everyday violation of the legal rights to a fair juicio. Judgment. So my concern is that it's not only the death toll that we're paying, but it's also this culture of frequent violation of human rights and this culture of constant violation of legal rights for a fair judgment.
Okay. I'm seeing no. Yes, we do have another question.
I understand that you have said that you would be growing marijuana. Is that something that you're contemplating doing?
Well, you know, many people put more crema on the tacos every day. And that phrase has grown since I visited Seattle. The question was, you as a farmer, the day that it is legal and the day that is not prohibited and can be done by any citizen, why not? I could be a good farmer of marijuana. But unfortunately, it's taken as a joke. I reiterate my position. I think it's very important that we move to a regime of intense regulatory system, as well as a very intense government action with the money that they're going to get for education, prevention, information, that will be the final real solution.
So you're not planning to open up marijuana?
Of course not. I'm making a lot of good money with the family exporting potatoes, broccolis, cauliflowers, Brussels sprouts, carrots, bell peppers, onions. We're happy with that.
All right, and on that note, we are going to wrap up. Thank you very much, President Fox, all of our presenters, everyone who came, members of the media, thank you. This is just the beginning. Stay tuned for more international movement and news.